It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, June 19th. Your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that's got so much going on with the draft coming up. And then we are going to continue talking about trades versus buyouts and all that. A lot of good stuff this week, Russ.
Busy week for me. I'll be on a lot of shows.
We'll get to it right now.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here, as always, with Russ Cohen, who is on Twitter at Sportsology. You can subscribe or follow us for free over on YouTube. We're on the SiriusXM app as well. Anywhere you listen to podcasts, you'll get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And speaking of YouTube, our first giveaway for getting to a subscription milestone is well underway. The deadline for entering is today, so make sure you check out over on YouTube the
Get in on it
channel. And one thing that's been really interesting about it, Russ, is we asked you to subscribe and comment who you think the Flyers will pick or who you want them to pick in the draft for the 7th overall. And looking at the data so far, I made a spreadsheet, put it all together, and Michkov is in the top spot by a significant margin, I would say. And then Oliver Moore is in the second spot. Now, a lot of people commented multiple players, so I picked the guy you said first, because I assume that's the one you would want the most. But so in this unscientific data collection, those are the kind of the two options that Flyers fans or our listeners are thinking about.
No, and it makes sense. I think they're guys that are on two different sides of the spectrum and represent two different things for the fan base. And I'll get more into it when we do it.
Yeah, I think that'll be really interesting. The Locked On NHL Mock Draft is going to be underway starting tomorrow. We've been talking about that for the last week or so, and it is incredible how many things have changed since we did that mock draft in terms of, what the word on the street is about what different teams are thinking and, what conventional wisdom is, and people's lists are changing and predictions are changing.
My final list changed a little. That's up on sportsology.com if you want to see it.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. And, I think that it's going to be fascinating when the list comes out starting tomorrow. And it's going to be released in chunks. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel and you'll see little 1-minute blurbs on our selections. And we'll, of course, expand on that during the shows as well. But so much going on in draft land for us here at Locked On. I want to talk a little bit about buyouts. We talked about that on Friday's show, and we went through like a whole exercise about potential contracts to buy out. And because the buyout period started on Friday, and I think, obviously the Flyers haven't done anything on that front as of yet. However, I think the big buyout news that came out with the Vancouver Canucks and Oliver Ekman-Larsson, I think it's an interesting buyout to look at in, the grand scheme of things, and just how terrible that contract was from jump, what they said, Ekman-Larsson was going to be for the Canucks and then isn't. And it just made me think about the Ilya Bryzgalov contract and what the Flyers did with that contract and signing it. And then, soon thereafter, having to do the buyout and having it be a cap hit for many, many years. Now, the time frames are different. The contract size is different, but I think the impact could be very similar here.
Yeah, I didn't like either one. I hated the
contract or the buyout.
The contracts and the buyouts for both of them. And I'm not right all the time, but Bryzgalov I knew was the wrong guy. I just knew it. And I watched him just go down that road and make the wrong decision. Ekman-Larsson, I talked about it, how I feel like for that kind of money, he's finished. If you want to put him on a third pairing and get a little something out of him, sure. That's for like $1.5 million a year, not for what they did. He was used up for the most part in Arizona. He had a lot of mileage on him. That was just a very bad idea to have him sign, to take him in that deal and take on all that salary. It was just a bad idea.
It was a tremendously bad idea, and I think everybody knew that at the time. And unfortunately, when you have new administration, so to speak, come in and new management come in, and they're evaluating the contracts that their predecessors signed or traded for,
right?
I think that there is a tendency to try and erase the past and say that wasn't me, and in some ways you try and make a trade to get rid of it, but like with that OEL contract, like you just weren't gonna get a deal on it with the kind of player he is. To your point about he's really like a third pairing, and maybe second pairing in the best case scenario, or in a Canucks scenario.
Yeah,
right?
He's not scoring the way he used to. He's not gonna.
Right. And so, you look at the Ekman-Larsson buyout, so that's an 8-year buyout. And, while the cap hit this upcoming year is very, very low, I think if you're looking at the Canucks, and this is to me like similar to the Flyers and the Briz deal, which is what made me think of it, is you look at what the cap hits are going to be and when, and where the Canucks are in a potential, like trying to rebuild there or retool or whatever they're doing in Vancouver. Which is somewhat more stressful than the Flyers, I think, but truth be told.
Yeah.
But, you look at their year, like 3 and 4 cap hit for that's $4.7 million of a cap hit, when ostensibly you should be turning the corner.
Right. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's just brutal. It's one of the more brutal buyouts. I get it. It's still a savings, but it's a brutal situation. And they're stuck with it, man. I mean, that's just the way it is. But some team will get OEL and they'll sign him for like 2 years, like $5 million or something less than that. And he'll do okay. But he used to be a guy that gets 14, 15, 20 goals, 60 points. He's not that guy now.
No. And if you look at the Brizgalov buyout, I think, the buyout rules and terms were different then. And I think that the Flyers got lucky in that sense, because that buyout was a 14-year buyout, which, I mean, I remember the weight of when that ended was just tremendous. But, that was a 1.6 million cap hit for those 14 years, because it was
for the rest of his life.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you look at the cap hit, like at least it was manageable, even though it was a lot longer and very painful. Because it was even throughout the course of the buyout, I think it was easier on the Flyers to do it then, as opposed to the way they do buyouts now, where it's like different, like it's calculated a lot different.
Yeah, they're still paying him. Like, just because it's not on the cap anymore, don't think they're not paying him. He's getting his check every year.
Yeah, he is, but no longer on the cap, and that's all we care about for the
That's
Flyers.
all we care about. The Flyers still add up the total nut, though,
Yeah, I guess they do. But yeah, I think that's, part of the reason why we're so deliberate about discussions around buyouts and what the impact could be, because you don't want a contract buyout to negatively impact your progression.
Right.
And your ability to field like the best guys on the ice that you can, and given the circumstances, and go after those free agents, sign those young players, like make all the moves that you want to make when you're stuck with like a $4.7 million cap hit for a player that you don't have. Like, that's not okay.
No, it's hard because you're having to replace him in the lineup. You're still paying for that guy. And it's clogging your ability to get other guys. So it's the hardest thing in hockey, and it's the worst thing to try and balance. They're gutsy for doing it because there is a savings there, but it will affect them for, like you said, the next 4 years. Easy.
Yeah, it will. So given all that, want to follow up on that conversation from Friday and talk about trading versus buying out versus keeping the the player and why you do each, because I think that's important when you approach any particular player and what your decision as a team is going to be on that process. And we will do that coming up next.
Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's all about easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, exclusions apply.
All right. Before we dig more into this trade versus buyout versus keep discussion, just a reminder again, it is mock draft week. So not only are we going to have our mock draft picks for the Locked On NHL mock draft, we're going to have some versus scenarios. So we're going to look at two guys that could be available at that pick, whether it's 7 or it's 22, and say, which would we choose if both are available? And one of the first ones we're going to talk about is related to the unscientific poll that we just talked about on YouTube. So very excited to get into that starting tomorrow. Looking at our discussion from Friday, where we talked about potential buyouts of Kevin Hayes, Tony DeAngelo, Nick Delorier, and Cal Peterson. And then looking at, some of your comments that you had, all of them very interesting. And so just wanted to elaborate on that discussion a little bit, just to get to the sort of basics of, why do we want to potentially buy out some guys and what leads a team to get to the buyout spot to begin with? Because I think that, the main question is, why do we need the cap space right now? And, the discussion of, well, of course they've already tried to trade these guys. You don't buy somebody out that you attempt to trade and can get a trade for, or, the trade is so lopsided that the buyout makes your cap hit better, right, in terms of salary retention.
So there's a few reasons why you want cap space. First one is, like, you can weaponize it. You could take somebody's bad contract, get a first round pick for it. Especially if it's only 1 year left on it and they want to get out from under because they want to get a player at the deadline. They give you a first rounder or a conditional first based on the trade. Maybe you get a second out of it, and it was good that you had that cap space because you did that. Then there's another one where, let's say Arizona, all of a sudden in 2-3 months we find out they're moving, and let's say they're going to Salt Lake, right? And Clayton Keller goes, hold on, I'm done, trade me. Well, Clayton Keller's 24. He's not going to ruin your plans for a rebuild. And if you have the cap space and you have the draft picks that you've been working up, then you can maybe make that deal. And so you have to have it for that too. So just because you're rebuilding, again, you're not going to close off to all other opportunities, and neither will the Flyers.
Yeah, and I think that's the main point why you want the cap space, right? Secondarily, the Flyers are in a cap crunch to begin with right now.
Yeah.
That when you have Travis Sanheim's salary is up, then you have Sean Couturier coming back into the lineup, potentially Cam Atkinson coming back into the lineup. Those are a lot of dollars allocated. And
you're not supposed to be a bad team with no cap
up
space.
The bad teams have a ton of cap space. Arizona has to work to get to the floor. There was a time
Right.
where Columbus had to work to get to the floor.
Right.
And that's what if you're a bad team with no cap space, there's no room to make those improvements.
You're doing it wrong.
Yeah. I think that's the main point here. And then again, it's that, when you're buying somebody out, it's because you've attempted to trade them and you have not been able to get a deal that's better than the buyout. That's just the bottom line.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, some teams bought out players right away. Like we talked about Oliver OEL. That was obvious. But the Flyers, they're going to try and, pedal off, try and make a deal till the last minute. They have till the 30th, so they're going to work
Yep.
hard and do that. But I still think they're going to do at least one buyout. I think there's a possibility of two, but you don't have to do it the first day. So as a fan, don't look for that right away. I mean, they're going to try and peddle these guys at the draft. They're going to do anything they can, beg, borrow, and steal to get some of these players off the roster. And if they can't, then that's the final alternative.
Right. And that's where, for me, the Kevin Hayes buyout didn't make sense in this particular year, even though I think there's a lot of benefits to doing it. I think that just financially, it's the same situation as the OEL contract where you're going to have a huge cap hit for that buyout in, year 2, year 3, when you're trying to turn a corner and you don't have the room to do what you want to do on your roster. And I think
right. And I don't disagree with you, but this is more about what's going on with the team. And literally a day after we talked about how it's so obvious that Kevin Hayes and Torts do not see eye to eye, that all of a sudden Frank Saravalli's talking about their fractured relationship. Like, we just didn't use the word fractured, but it was obvious that it wasn't good. And I was there on breakup day and saw how Kevin was sort of handling it. And I knew he was just putting up with it. Like, I've known him long enough to know that he was just being a good soldier and putting it up with it in his mind. And then Torts on his mind is like, this guy's not working out for me. So that's why that possibility exists, is because the coach is going to push for it.
And I think it's a fine line. And I understand there's like a negative effect in the locker room and with Torts. And, I think it's just a matter of which do you want to prioritize in this situation. 1 year of maybe some tension in the locker room versus having extra freedom to do what you want with your roster for 2 or 3 years down the road. And
that's
it's a choice.
Fair point. It is a choice.
I think it's just a choice. And for me, the choice is I want the flexibility down the road. And this year is going to be painful probably in a bunch of ways, and might as well be painful to have Kevin Hayes around, as far as that tension. And again, like Kevin Hayes, the player, think he has value and can contribute.
Oh, he does.
Yeah, that's not even a question.
It's a square peg round hole situation. It has nothing to do with anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, that is an important part of the discussion there in terms of why you're making those choices. And especially in a situation like Kevin Hayes, which to me is similar to Oliver Ekman-Larsson that we talked about in terms of, do you make that choice? Because the cap hit is going to be significant.
And trust me, Kevin Hayes will be relieved if he gets bought out or gets traded. Yeah. He'll be relieved because he liked Alain Vigneault. That was why he came in. And that's a fit for him. And you saw that he really had good numbers for him and everything else. He still had pretty good numbers for Torts, but you can see that it's not a fit. And it's a strain for him to be able to, he doesn't get to play his way. And I'm not saying all players should get to play their way, but with Torts, you don't get to play your way. You got to play his way. And you could see that it took a toll on him.
Yeah, I think so too. And, I think that's why you work everything you can to try and make a trade.
Right.
Up until the end of this buyout deadline, you do everything you can to make the best trade possible. And then if there isn't something that's going to help you, that's when you reconsider the buyout. But you don't do that until that point.
No.
So the other thing that came up a little bit was, why not Rasmus Ristolainen in the buyout? And I think for me, what he was able to do improvement-wise this year says keep him around at least for another year. Or you try and trade him and see what you could get in the return. But if you don't get anything in a return, I think he's a good guy to have in the locker room. I think it's going to be extremely important if the defense is young to have somebody like that around and who can handle maybe some of the physicality that the younger guys aren't going to be able to handle, as quickly in the league. And I just think that he's a try to trade until the last possible second and then keep him around if you can.
Yeah, I wouldn't even try and trade him because, again, you do have to have him around for some of the young defensemen to develop. He does set the tone physically in a lot of games. Is he going to have some turnovers that bug you? Sure. But his defense is a lot better, and what got a lot better under Torts. And when his defense got a lot better, then all of a sudden some of his offense came back too. More than
yes, it did.
So, and at least that, that was a positive. So I don't see the rush for Ristolainen. Now, of course, like you said, if there was a massive offer out there, then maybe you have to consider it. But now that you got rid of Provorov, you do have to be careful. You don't want to strip mine the defense, even if you think you're going to be a bad team, because you still have younger defensemen that are developing. Cam York is still developing. You don't want to screw them up.
Yeah, and I think that's really the core of it, right? Is you need somebody who's going to be able to be a support and a mentor for this D.
Yes.
And I think Risto could do that for a year. I'm not saying he's your long-term top set, defenseman. I think that for a year, he's a good guy to have around.
He is. He definitely does not rock the boat. He is good in the locker room.
Yeah. All right. Well, given all of that, it's Monday. And of course, that means we are going to name our Nemesis of the week. It's a favorite part of the week for us here at Locked On Flyers. And we are going to get to that coming up next. Russ, I am trepidatious, but also excited about this week's Nemesis. And if you are newer to the program out there, and are recently subscribed, each and every Monday, we look at the world of the Flyers and the world of the NHL and say, what is bothering us the most? What is making us the most nervous? And so we name our Nemesis just for that week. And then hopefully we can move on to something different for the week after that. And last week when we were talking about Nemesis, I think for me, it was the uncertainty that based on the Provorov trade, it seemed like the Flyers were just going for it in terms of this rebuild. So we really might not know where the draft picks would end up until the last minute, because they might make some more trades. They might wheel in, they might trade down from the 22nd or trade up from the 22nd. Like, we just don't know. And so that uncertainty was my nemesis. And then, going into this week, I think, while this is not draft week, it's the week before the draft. I think this is where the second guessing begins. And that's my nemesis for this week, is second guessing my lists, second guessing my choices, because this is such a crucial year for the Flyers. And I'm like, I want them to get it right. And unfortunately, we won't know if they got it right until 2-3 years down the road, at least, if not 4 to 5 years down the road. When you if you're going to have a sustained successful team at that point, right? But I think that this is where it all begins, and we've been talking about it that way. And so just the second guessing of what I want versus what I think they'll do.
All right, so mine is draft related also. My nemesis right now is, do not ask me, text me, even if you see me on the street. Don't ask me about the 2024 draft. I don't care about the 2024 draft. I don't care how many picks any team has, Flyers included. Don't tell me that the 2024 draft is extremely strong on defense when maybe you heard one person say it and now you're going to kind of go with that and hope with that. I don't even want to talk about that. There's a time for that, and that'll come after like rookie camp, way after that, and I start building my list for next year. But I don't even get seriously into it until October, after I get past the USHL's first tournament and some of the other stuff. So it's like, don't talk to me about it. Don't ask me. I do not care. I focus on this draft for a reason. I want to give the kids from this draft their due. I'm still writing about it for my site and other sites, profiles, and I do it because I want people to learn about these players, and they want to tell me, and I want to tell you. But I don't think it serves anybody any purpose if I start writing about a bunch of guys from the next year's draft. It does serve, to me, it's not the time.
Well, I will take exception to one thing you said, is that I do care how many picks the Flyers have in.
Well, that's fine. If you care about the picks, that's fine.
Yeah, just in terms of having assets and the ability to maybe affect things in this year's draft, having assets for next year's draft to trade is an important thing, or building assets for next year's.
Okay, I'll say this though. My caveat to your caveat is, it's nice. Let's say if you have 3 second-round picks for next year and you could puff your chest out, you needed them for this year.
Well, that's
you needed them for this year, not for next year.
That is absolutely true, and
that's it. I'm done
for a while. But no, I do think your point about giving this year's players their due is a good one, and want to focus on them. And I've said this before, talking about previous year's drafts, and ever since I started digging more into prospect study, and this is going back a number of years. Now I have many children in the NHL that are on many teams that are not the Flyers. That makes me both sad, but also proud of them. That guys that I thought maybe were gonna do really well in the NHL are doing well or getting there, and they're just on other teams doing it. But that being said, I am very excited for who the Flyers are going to pick up, no matter who they are, because
Yeah.
they're part of the organization now, and I'm now on their team.
Right, it's the
I'm gonna
future.
root
You
for
should
their
always be
success.
excited about what the future might hold, and so that's always a positive.
Yeah, I think so as well. And we got like a week and a half to go until the draft at this point. So it's really getting close, and we're gonna know who those draft picks
And that still
are.
doesn't mean I won't nitpick the pick and say, there were
Yeah,
better guys on the
that's
board.
true.
I might do that. And Rachel might do that. She's done it before too. So
I
we are
have.
not closing ourselves off to that. So don't think that this nice little kumbaya moment means that we're not going to do that, because I can't guarantee that.
Right. But I do think that, again, even if you might have picked somebody else, like they're on our team now, and I'm on their team now, and
Yeah.
I'm like
You
the
want
biggest
them to do well. Yes.
I am the biggest Cutter Gauthier fan out there, even though I wouldn't have picked him.
Right.
So just want to say that. All right, that will do it for today's show. Everyday listeners can look forward tomorrow. The Hockey Hall of Fame will be announcing their honorees on Wednesday. So we're going to talk about some predictions tomorrow, as well as those versus discussions. We're going to talk about Mitchkov versus Moore and Reinbacher versus Sandin Pellikka. So lots to talk about, and we will do that then. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. Send in your questions via Twitter at LockedOnFlyers, or you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Have a great day, everyone.